welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for small business owners and entrepreneurs, where we show you how to build a successful business and to have a life too. We're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time and to get off the treadmill so we can experience a life of significance. And now, your host and the author of the #1 best-selling business book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, Chuck Blakeman.
Today, I'm with Jeff Krommendyk. Jeff started his career in the insurance industry with Century Insurance. And after a great 10-year run with them, he followed his dream and his passion for insurance and purchased an independent insurance agency in Littleton, Colorado, and Security First Insurance Agency was born. Jeff's journey as a business owner is a great story to so many of us. The thrill of the startup, the long hours, the tough times, coming to the end of himself, and learning how to build a business that gave him freedom in his business that 2 years ago he eventually was able to sell. Faith, family, and friends continue to be at the top of his priorities, and he's happily married to Leslie for the last 28 years and has two amazing kids, two boys that are launching their own careers. Welcome, Jeff. It is a thrill to have you back.
Thanks for having me back, Chuck. Appreciate it.
You bet. First time we talked about how you, in your personal journey from starting out as a business owner, how you got to where you understood that you could build a mature business that functioned when you were not there. That was a big aha for you. And you spent just a couple of years figuring that out. And then you had a very long run where you were able to enjoy that business freedom in your business, not from it. And now you've sold the business. But I want to go back to I know you're still doing your earnout, but I want to go back to when you owned the business. And I want to talk about this idea of stakeholder mindset, this idea of culture. You know, we think culture is something that giant corporations should have, and it doesn't matter for us if we only have 3, 5, 10 people. We just, we get along. But I want to talk about what your culture was there and the stakeholder mindset that you had and how you came about that. So give me a starting place with what you think of when you think of a stakeholder.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just, to your comment, Chuck, about, hey, a business of 10 people versus a huge corporation. I mean, I think the reality is that there is a culture,
Yes.
Regardless, right?
Whether you like it or not.
Yep. Well, you like it or not, it's just a question of who's driving it. And so I think, when we did get to, 10, 15 employees, we really realized it was important to be intentional about the culture that we wanted to create. And so, having read your second book, Why Employees Are a Bad Idea, and really just introducing this concept of the industrial age mindset. I can just say that I'm guilty of that. I really came out of that. I'm a Gen X guy, right? So we're just on the heels of the boomers. And so, this whole industrial age mindset is still pretty heavily ingrained in me. And just the idea of a ownership mindset or a stakeholder mindset was something that I certainly wanted for myself, which is the reason I started a business. But I saw how freeing it could be for even our people who maybe didn't have the risk tolerance to start their own business, but yet still had just great ideas and could really own this business as if I own it and even be awarded for it. So we thought, what a great culture to start.
Yeah, so that's a great motivation to want to do this, is so that everybody can kind of fulfill the business owner dream inside of them. When you're right, most people in today's world are not in a place where that feels good. And is a risk they want to take. And yet they still want to own. Mm-hmm. I go back to this research I did on ownership, on business ownership, and I researched what percentage of people owned their own business before we had factories for thousands of years. And we're talking about free people here. Over 90% of free people, free families, owned their own business and worked for themselves. And it's not because they had to. It's because they wanted to. And it's because ownership over my life, having control over my life, having the authority to make decisions is an adult impulse. It's an adult desire. It's in our DNA. It's in our makeup. And so for you to provide a place where you could be, okay, yeah, you own the business, so you get to make the most decisions, but then you realize I'm going to want other people who will be able to make decisions as well and have the power and the authority to do that. What gave you that crazy idea? Because that's not how business is supposed to run. We all know that the answer to the question why in business is because I own the business and you don't. That's why. So
Yeah.
what gave you the idea that you should do that differently?
Yeah. Well, I think it does go back to what you just said, Chuck. I think we have been inherently born with this desire. I think it's also it's an honorable thing. It's
Yes.
a culture of honor. I mean, I think there's no reason we as human beings should be treated as assets or as property per se, and therefore just acknowledging the gift set that God has given every individual that ever came to work for us, and allowing them to operate in that gift and in that lane that they best operate in, giving them a voice, inviting them into decision making, really treating them like a human being. I think that's really what it's about. It's about really just honoring who they are, who they've been created to be, giving them agency to make decisions, not decisions that are necessarily going to sink the ship, but certainly decisions that are going to make it better. And I just thought, what a great honoring culture to be treated the way I want to be treated, or how I would like to treat others.
It's a beautiful thing. I want to, you mentioned the word stakeholder. I mentioned it as well. So let's give a context for that for our listeners and our viewers. A stakeholder, from our perspective, what we talk about is we want every person who used to be an employee to now be a stakeholder. Employee, we don't have time for this today, but employee has a terrible history going all the way back to slavery. I mean, 5,000 years of slavery. And employees and management, that whole concept came out of slavery. And you can't rehabilitate the word employee. It has too bad of a background to it. So there's plenty of words you could use, but I like stakeholder, because stakeholders, like, there's these 40 wagons lined up on a starting line in the US in the plains in 1800, and they're all racing out to, there's a stake at every 40 acres has a stake in it. And they're out there to put a stake in the ground beside that stake and say, this is mine. This is my land, and I'm going to be responsible for it. And we want that kind of mindset versus the mindset that we've taught for 150 years, which is shut up, sit down, live invisibly, go out quietly, act like a child at work. Managers will make all the decisions, and you're a human doing, not a human being. That's an employee. So give me your perspective on how people at your place worked with the word stakeholder and what that meant in how you actually did business on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, I think it started with using that word and just getting
just starting with that. Words matter, don't they? That's a great way to look at this. Just change the word to begin with. Beautiful.
Exactly. So we took our, employee handbook, changed it to a stakeholder handbook, and every word in it. I mean, that's a 20-30 page document, and we just had to go through and get rid of all those words and add in stakeholder. And so I think that's where it started immediately. But then second of all, it started in the in the way that we posted our job ads. For example, I think that was super important. We didn't want to attract the employee mindset, or somebody who didn't want to be treated like an adult. So it started there, and really starting to attract these people that wanted to be treated like adults, and certainly like stakeholders. And so right there from the first interview, we started to really ask questions that specifically would really, I think, separate the adults from the children, just depending on how they thought about things, and really kind of started right from the beginning with that stakeholder mentality, and making sure that we actually had material that could be coached into a stakeholder if they weren't already one when they joined our organization.
Well, as you were talking there at the end, this popped in my head. Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. You said, okay, what do I want? I want adults who will, and adults, what is the one thing that differentiates an adult from a child? It's agency, the ability and the responsibility to make decisions. And we're all adults at home. We have all these big responsibilities that make us adults. And as soon as we step across the threshold, we lose all of our adulthood unless we're managers. We're just told what to do all day long, and we're treated like children. You didn't want those people. You knew it. You made that definition clear. You changed your handbook. You changed your mindset. And then you started putting that new end in mind in your ads. You came up with questions for interviewing people. And it just went from there. So you started with that. And gee, what a surprise. We end up more often where we want to go than not knowing where we want to go. So it's simple. It's just not easy. What are some of the other things you had to do in order to get this switch? Because sometimes it's like pushing water uphill with a rake. It's, hey, I don't want to be an adult. What were some of the things that you ran into as you decided you wanted to have adults at work?
Yeah. Yeah, from there, it really began to, really be woven into every, inch of the fabric of the organization. We couldn't just say that, we wanted stakeholders, or we wanted people to own their desks or own the business. We had to start treating them that way. And so it really, started, even with our meeting rhythms and who were in those meetings, what we were discussing, and really, seeking the input of our stakeholders on some major decisions. Now, again, I love the idea of a boat where we would identify above the waterline decisions versus below the waterline decisions. Those below the waterline decisions were my decision and my partner's decisions to make, because those are the decisions that could potentially take this thing down. Above the water decisions, we just backed off. Like those were going to be cosmetic for the most part. They could, if made wrong, and a bunch of them cause some structural damage to the organization. But we really wanted input from those people, and we wanted them to own the decisions that they were making and be responsible for carrying them through. So that was certainly a big part of it.
And that's a great mechanism, Jeff, and it's a great alliteration. Bill Gore, the guy who invented Gore-Tex, came up with that. He had 10,000. They ended up with 10,000 people, not a single manager in the whole place. It was all team-based decision making. The teams made decisions. There was no manager, and the teams didn't make a decision in the vacuum. To your point, and he would use that analogy. If somebody's going to shoot a hole in the boat above the water line, I'm going to let them do it, because then they have to patch the hole. And how did I learn? How did you learn, Jeff? We all learn by making mistakes. Yes. And one of the jobs of management is to keep people from ever making a mistake, which means they'll never grow up. If we never let our kids make a mistake, they never grow. So I just love that analogy. And it just became this simple. The bigger the decision becomes, the more people who should be involved in it, because we don't want to sink the ship. So that was one of the ways in which you did that. You distributed the decision-making.
Yeah.
And you allowed people to make decisions that you knew you wouldn't make that way. Did they ever make one that you were pretty sure was a bad idea that ended up better than the one you would have made? I admit that happened to me a lot, sadly. Yeah, there's no way they should do that. Oh, wait a minute. That turned out
absolutely. Really yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could, a couple of them come to mind for sure, but nonetheless, just to keep it at a high level, I would say, by all means, things that I didn't think about, and then things that I thought, good grief, that's just not a good idea, but let's play it out. And sure enough, it really worked out well, especially working with the different generations, right? Like this millennial generation was one of the biggest challenges that we had, but you know what? They thought differently than we did, and that didn't make it wrong. Yep. It just, it was just different. And oftentimes resulting in a better outcome than what I would have, thought about. So absolutely, I think, I'm really thankful for, giving enough rope, to these people to really come up with some innovative ideas that I just wouldn't have thought would have been good. But sure enough, given 6-12 months later, it turned out to be a great decision.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to understand that we all learn by making mistakes. Neurology teaches us this. If you do something perfectly, if you've never shot a basketball before, and you somehow put 10 of them right through the hoop, you haven't learned a darn thing, according to neurology. If you've missed 7 out of 10, you've learned all sorts of things, and it'll teach you how to never miss again or miss less. And same thing with us at work. But it's hard for us to want to do that. What happened viscerally for you? What were the concerns you had in distributing the decision making? What were some things you thought might go wrong that turned out to be okay?
Yeah, I think ultimately, really coming up for air maybe 2 years later and realizing that this wasn't the business that I wanted. Like, this was maybe the business that several other people wanted. But I think that the key was that before we introduced the stakeholder culture, we had a very, very clear vision as to our vision, our mission, and our core values. And so I think I had a fear of them making decisions that didn't align with our core values or didn't align with where the company was going. But as long as we kept that front and center, and they were considering all those things, it really proved to be a great way to go about making decisions on behalf of the business and letting them run it.
So if they were ever about to make a decision that you absolutely didn't agree with, did you feel like you still needed to always allow them to make that decision, or could you step in?
Yeah, I think when it went below the waterline, which I would put our vision, our core values, and our mission right there, right? Like, if it was going to sacrifice what we believed in and where we were going to lead this company to, by all means, we would step in and have discussion.
And I have this definition, or not definition, but this description of what a leader does. The art of leadership is to know how few decisions the leader needs to make.
Mm-hmm.
Now, implied in that is there are decisions that the leaders need to make. Managers make all the decisions. Leaders teach other people to make decisions as much as they can and get the heck out of the way. And that's what I've heard throughout this podcast. Distributed decision making. You are just getting other people to figure this out, be adults, so that you personally would have a lot more freedom to worry about the things you should be. And that's the art. You had a few things that were below the waterline. I have made a decision that you will not violate our values, our mission, and our culture that way. And then the rest of it is stuff I'm going to teach somebody else to do. And if they're about to do something stupid that's going to hurt us, well, then they don't have to do that. So it's not anarchy. It's not chaos. It's not like, well, if I give distributed decision making, I'll lose control. No, figure out what are the things that you need to have control over and make that decision. I love it. Just real clarity on your part. So how did that help you and your partner personally in your business life and your personal life to have all these other people making decisions now?
Yeah, I think it took some of the pressure off, certainly, once the level of trust was established and just a good track record of people making good decisions. And then second of all, really freed us up to really lead, like I said, from the crow's nest, right? So not in the weeds anymore, not on the treadmill, certainly. We are now being able to actually operate like executives, really, start, doing some long-term planning, really, again, just be strategic about where we're going, as opposed to really, again, being in the weeds on every single little decision. It freed us up to stay in our lanes, do what we do best. And it really brought a level of efficiency to the organization that, we hadn't had before.
Yeah, I'm sitting here giggling to myself, realizing, when you have adults at work, you don't have to babysit.
Right.
And boy, does that free you up to get to the really important stuff that you enjoy doing. Well, again, we've just scratched the surface here on what it means to have a stakeholder mindset and a stakeholder culture. And I won't put you on the spot. If you want to give somebody a way to get a hold of you to talk more about that, great. Otherwise, if you want, they can just get a hold of us and we can connect them with you and say, here's how he did it.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. You
That
can
work?
always email me at Jeff Krommendyk gmail.com. Chuck's got my contact info. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Yeah, beautiful. Jeff, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be with you. I love how I've seen your journey from being a startup to getting to where you are, having sold your business, getting real freedom in your business before you did that. It's been a joy to be with you today. I look forward to continuing the journey together.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. Appreciate all you've done.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Get Off the Treadmill podcast. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and hit the like button to ensure you are receiving the latest tools you need to grow your business and to get off the treadmill. If you want more information on the 3 to 5 Club, the Crankset Group, or to book Chuck as a business advisor, speaker, or workshop leader, you can contact us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Until next time, have a great week.